good morning here in Santa Monica. It's good afternoon in other parts of the Americas business. I'm Robin Duda. I am the VP of Brand Strategy and Experience Design in 3Cs, Cruise, Chemicals, and Catering, but also have the pleasure of leading the Customer Experience Council and Project 53, which we launched back in January, or July, actually not January, July. So we are here with our second broadcast. We have a very, very dear friend of mine, Scott Norville. He is the Vice President of Digital Audience Development.
Perfect.
At 21st Century Fox. He has been kind enough to join us here. And kind of how this all stemmed was, much like with my friend Kate, who spoke from Coke in July, we were just chatting and talking about some of the challenges within his roles. And I'm going to let him speak a little bit about your career and the path that's gotten there. But bridging the gap between movie brands and event brands. And we had some really interesting lively conversation quite many months ago, and thought that this might be a really interesting forum for us to all discuss how we extend the life of our brands beyond the 3, 4, 5 days of a show that we have, and how do we digitally engage with audiences and communities that we've all kind of struggled with, I think, over the years. How are other industries tackling that? What are they doing? And kind of hearing a different story, and hopefully tying that back to, even if 1, 2, or 3 of you have an idea for your businesses, it could help improve what UBM is doing over there. So, as opposed to the way, for those of you that did watch the Coke version of this in July, that was more presentation-based, video and photos. What I noticed was the really engaging, lively part of the broadcast was when folks really started getting into questions and getting into their businesses and asking specific things. So we thought, well, maybe it might be a better forum to use and just do very Q&A style. Free-flowing. We're going to start with a couple of questions, but really this is open to everyone across Americas who is watching, so please submit your questions via Blue Jeans, or you can IM me. I'll grab my laptop a little bit into the presentation and start to look for questions. And anyone who's here in Santa Monica, of course, you're going to have to come closer to up here if you want to ask a question, because we're using this very high-tech telecom system rigged to the Blue Jeans broadcast. Sound great? Yes. All right. So, Scott, thank you again.
My pleasure.
Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your career? It's super interesting.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for having me here. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you very much, Robin, for the invitation. Like Robin said, we've known each other for many years. And I think this format is a great idea. It works well for me. I know that your last speaker, Kate, with Coke, she had a bunch of very flashy visuals. I mean, I brought some visuals as well. It's just basically Robin and I at college. I don't know if anyone, I can pass them out. Okay, yeah, we'll get we'll get to that later. But so found them in an old box. This was well before, by the way, social media. So I've had a rather circuitous career that's gotten me to 21st Century Fox, but some very interesting experiences. After college, I actually worked for the U.S. government in Washington, D.C., or rather outside Washington, D.C., for a few years, joined the family business, so to speak. My parents were career Foreign Service officers, so we lived abroad for most of my life. And we would live for 2 years here and 3 years there in places like Kenya and Japan and Switzerland and Russia. And then we'd come back to the U.S. in between. After college, I started working for the government, and then left the government to go to business school.
Can you not say where in the government?
Yeah, well, I worked at the Central Intelligence Agency for a few years. And
interesting, actually.
Well, I mean, now we have to kill not just these people, but New York. It's a lot of people. But I left the government to pursue a business degree at the University of Virginia. And I think that business degree was what ultimately led to this career in media and media tech sort of space. My first job out of business school was at ABC News in New York City, where I did strategy and operations, working on how to modernize ABC News. I don't know if you all are ABC News fans, David Muir, Diane Sawyer, all that. But when I came into it, we were really struggling with how to modernize the business and make it more oriented towards, of course, the internet and the way people consume on platforms now. ABC News then yielded my next job, which was at the Walt Disney Company. ABC News is part of the Walt Disney Company, but this was an internal transfer to a different part of the Walt Disney Company, the Disney Retail Group out here in LA, and that's when I got to LA and began that experience. That was a great job as well. It was focused on expanding Disney's retail presence and e-commerce presence into various new markets abroad and also domestically. So for some context there, the Walt Disney Company sold off the Disney stores and then reacquired it because they believed rightly that it was a very important brand touch point for the Walt Disney Company. The parks are, of course, I think the most immersive brand touch point for the Walt Disney Company, but the stores were sort of this miniature version of that, where you could come into an immersive environment, be surrounded by Disney product and characters and content, and then go away with this sort of residual memory. So in that sense, Walt Disney Company realized it was an important part of the business. They reacquired it and put a special emphasis on modernizing and expanding that brand touch point. After that, I joined Google, where I worked for YouTube, doing YouTube partnerships. So my group, which is based here out of Beverly Hills, managed YouTube's relationships with various digital companies that put content up on YouTube, among them Fox. Our mandate was to grow the business of these various partners on the platform and make sure that they were taking full advantage of all the latest product innovations, opportunities for revenue, etc. So where are we? We're now at YouTube. Okay, so late last year, I received an offer from 21st Century Fox. They were very interested in bringing someone from YouTube on board to internally focus on this element of their business very carefully. And as I'm sure, or as you may or may not know, Fox has an extensive viewership on YouTube and other digital platforms. We get about just over 1 billion views a month on YouTube alone. Which, to put that in context, if you were to stack Fox up against other digital companies that focus entirely on this, Fox would be somewhere around the 25th largest digital network, and that's without any organization around it. That's without headcount devoted to that precise focus. And so it's an extraordinary opportunity, an extraordinary untapped business inside of 21st Century Fox. And so my responsibility now is to focus on developing the strategy around how to make that a viable business and how to leverage digital platforms to extend the life of our brands beyond those dates that they are the most focused on, the most prominent. So in that sense, I think when Robin and I were talking, there is absolutely this analogous kind of relationship whereby you guys will have an event that goes on for a week or several days. We'll have a theatrical release that will be, for all intents and purposes, kind of in top of mind for a month or something like that. So in the immediate run up to the theatrical release, during the press junkets and all the interviews and things like that, the first weekend, the second weekend, when most of the revenue is derived, and then it goes out of the public mindset for quite a while. And so the challenge for places like Fox and all studios, and some studios do this much better than others. I think if you look at Disney does it rather well. But the challenge for studios is to make sure that you've invested all this money into an Alien movie, you've invested all this money into Predator, and you derive the attention that you want, you get the revenue that you wanted from that. But once it goes away, once it leaves the theater, once it leaves that first weekend, pretty much, how do you extend the life of that brand so that the fans of that movie are fed some kind of content or fed something to enjoy for the rest of the year? In the case of movies, it's not just a year; it's 3 years, 3 to 5 years between franchise installments. Television is much shorter. Television is to some degree more analogous, I think, to events because you have a season and then you go off season for the summer. But still, it's the same. You have this cyclical attention, and then you have this dormancy that you have to address.
So we were lucky enough, Dan Salerno, myself, and Scott walked around the lot yesterday a little bit, kind of talking about some of the tactics that you're using via YouTube and using digital content. So from a UBM standpoint, in all of our brands, I'm not sure, and again, I could be wrong, but folks in this room, probably GDC being the most prominent, using video of the content from our conferences. So think about, we produce content. We have lots of expo and exhibit, of course, but we also produce lots of content. I'm not sure what folks in this room or across Americas are doing to then utilize that content after the show. I know the brand that we run, I mean, we like to say that we're capturing all of it, and then we're not really doing anything super productive with it. We still, I think, are in the mindset or a little scared from a content standpoint of it's paid. It's a large piece of some of our portfolio's revenues. How do we then, if we put that into the public, why would people want to pay to come to our events anymore? And that's, I see some heads kind of nodding. It's something that we've struggled with, gosh, since I've been in events. So Scott, I would love to, if you could speak up a little bit too. We got some.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
From in here.
Oh, right.
People that are at home. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing at 21st Century Fox from short form video and how that's helping your audience engagement? I think there's some parallel to, we talked about, to the struggle that we have with paid content versus on-site versus the cannibalization of that post-show. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been dealing with?
Sure. So has everyone seen like one of the Alien movies? There was a recent one, Alien Covenant, that came out by Ridley Scott, but there have been like 6 or 7 over the course of time. And the most recent one came out, I believe it was in March. It was pretty successful. It made, I don't know, domestically about $150 million, and when you combine that with international, it was a success. But now, we don't really know exactly when the next Alien installment will be, right? So it could be 3 years from now. But we know that there are core fans for Alien. We know that and by the way, it's not like all the people that went to the movies, right? I mean, a lot of people went to movies because it was the big movie out that weekend, or one of them. But the core Alien fans are a small minority of that. And that's who we're servicing by creating short form series that extend the universe of Alien. So, we basically map out.
Explain short form series just so everyone runs.
Oh, short form is basically not like a full length TV show or a full length film. Short form is, anything from a clip of an actual full length film or TV show to a series that we actually create to be shorter than your ordinary series. So for example, 22 minutes is essentially the length of a half-hour show, and then about 44 minutes. These might be 15 minutes or 12 or 8 minutes long. They're intentionally short because we know by looking at behavior of young people's consumption behavior now on tablets and on phones, they simply don't have the living room experience that we all, or not all of us maybe, but like we certainly all grew up with, right? Like you sit down, you spend an hour focusing on a TV set. They're
like, what was it on Friday nights? It was like TGIF.
Of course, yeah, or like must-see TV on Thursday nights. This whole idea, and I know I'm not saying anything new, this is talked about very frequently, but this whole notion of a linear programming day, the notion of like, this is on at this time and therefore I have to be there for it, is just completely lost on an entire generation. And I would suggest that anyone under the age of 20 just doesn't even remember or have any context whatsoever. So when we talk about short form, we're talking about programming to that particular set of people. And so the best way we think to service that set is to develop short form content, which is less expensive and more easily delivered on these devices that people are used to consuming on, phones and tablets. And because the experience is such that you're just more tolerant of a shorter experience. And so we are in the process now of looking at franchises like Alien, franchises like Predator, franchises like Planet of the Apes, which are well-known brands at Fox, and trying to figure out, well, what are the derivatives of those brands that we could put in a short-form series? Like, how big are those universes? So, what we've done, or what we're doing, is mapping out those universes. So for example, for anyone who is aware, the Walt Disney Company acquired Lucasfilm. And they didn't just acquire Star Wars; they acquired all the universes and characters that were attributable to that company. And so you'll see, I think I read an article the other day. I don't know if this is actually happening, but they were contemplating a movie about Boba Fett. Does anyone know who that is? An obscure character from. There you go. Okay, yeah, this obscure character that didn't really have much of a presence, but was part of this wider universe that they decided, because there's this kind of like familiarity with him, they're going to develop an offshoot of that. And so that's what we're doing with our franchises like Apes and Aliens and Predator, is mapping out the universes, understanding who all the characters are, understanding what all the plot twists and turns are, so that we can then derive what we think might be the best option for a short form series, who to focus on or what to focus on. And oftentimes that means we look at YouTube as a means of informing us what are people interested in. So the YouTube platform is like complex and esoteric, and not that you can't understand it, but I barely understand it, so I don't want to talk about it at too much length. But basically, we know, we can tell what content of ours is resonating, right? So we can go out there and read via YouTube analytics, like this particular clip with this particular character and this particular scene resonates more with this particular demographic, because we can see the viewership data. And so, you know, from your perspective, what would be interesting to know is, like, of those videos that you put out onto these platforms, if you could read analytics behind those videos, what are the conferences that are resonating the most? In which countries are they resonating? What are the particular types or genres of content that are resonating? Is it your behind the scenes stuff? Is it your like outtakes? Assuming you did any of this. Is it like keynote addresses or famous guests? Because YouTube, I think, is the best way for you to understand your fandom's expression of affinity, right? Because it's a direct kind of feedback.
So that's really interesting. So I think, you know, from a content standpoint, we're not. I know none of the brands that I work on are doing that. You know, we have this content. We either think we need to date it for people to get into it, but you're saying that there's potentially some type of ROI that can be achieved from maybe publicizing some
100%.
content in different ways.
100%.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the full, what was it, full screen?
Yeah. So
the analytics behind that.
Yeah. So I think it's funny, because at Fox there used to be that exact same mentality, right? So as recently as a few years ago, there was this notion that people who upload clips of Fox brands on YouTube are pirates. They're all pirates. They're all scum. We have to take down all this stuff immediately and prevent people from enjoying it. The only occasions where people should be able to watch Fox content are when we put it up on our channels and we direct that. And what they started to discover at Fox and elsewhere was that actually this is the wrong perspective. Like, this is your greatest source of marketing that you can imagine. Our viewership, that billion views a month that I just described to you, is 85% from user uploads. So it's 85% of those views come from people like Robin and you all and me, who have our own YouTube pages, or YouTube channels rather, that are uploading a clip of Planet of the Apes, or uploading like a clip from, you know, your most recent event, just because we're fans, or just because we want to talk about it, or just because, I don't know, no reason. And that's where all the viewership is coming from. So that is more than 80% of our viewership, and it's this huge source. It's basically fans standing with a megaphone saying, we love this, we like this, and we can derive value from the analytics we get. So, like, we know roughly demographically who they are, where they live, whether or not they're enjoying this content on tablets or devices or whatever. So we can understand who they are. If we blocked everything, if we took it all down, we wouldn't have any idea, first of all, what that level of fandom looks like, and B, who those people are. So it's enormously helpful to know that. And so yeah, so we, and not only that, but YouTube allows you to do this. Facebook is, when I think of video platforms, by the way, I think of basically just two major ones. There's Facebook and YouTube. Facebook is much more sophisticated because it's been around much longer, but Facebook is really ramping its ability to protect content, but also to provide analytics to people who put stuff up. But yeah, I mean, you can think of these platforms as a means of actually communicating with your fans. So YouTube allows you to affix to videos certain calls to action, right? So for example, if there's a clip of apes out there that someone else has used, I don't know who they are.
Just apes in general?
Well, not just like an ape.
Planet.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
No, yeah. Not just like someone in a gorilla. It's not like a gorilla suit. Is a gorilla an ape? There's like different genuses. So if someone uploads a clip of Planet of the Apes, we can then use that clip, leverage that clip for messaging. So we can direct the viewership audience on that clip back to a different YouTube channel. We can direct them back to the official Planet of the Apes channel. We can direct them back to another Fox channel, like maybe the Fox Broadcasting channel. So you are able to use fan uploads as a means of directing audience, digital audience, from one place to another, and that's what we try to do with our YouTube viewership, and that's what you could very well do with your own.
I think it's just so cool. I mean, I don't know about you guys, and I'm going to open it up to the floor, but I think there's such a world of possibility that we're struggling to. We have our databases, and we're talking about how do we grow them, but also I think a lot of the brands that we have aren't. Not all of them, but we're trying to figure out how do we get the next generation of buyer, the next generation of seller. How do we attract millennial audiences? There's this whole world of this, content engagement that we're really not exploring with material we already have. That we have in archive and in video all over the place that could potentially help our marketing efforts more. I mean, I don't know how much stuff this kind of costs, but
well, you're already recording all of this stuff, right? So if you're recording all of this stuff, you just basically can use derivatives of what you've already done. And so in that sense, like for us, our digital short form business is a business whereby we put ads up against clips of things we already made and we already produced. And so in that sense, it's all pure incremental revenue for you, and then you can then funnel that revenue back into something else that is of interest to you. So it's something to think about. Now, to be clear, not everything is interesting on YouTube, right? So one should not think that, okay, I take a video of this particular conference or this particular event and I edit it in such a way that it just features bloopers or whatever, and that will automatically go viral on YouTube and people will care. But I think if you do, and that's the same, by the way, with studios, it's the same with media companies, but I feel like if you do identify, the particular events or the particular brands that are especially resonant, which you can, and are especially interesting. I think you mentioned that Cruise has a rabid fan base, right?
Yeah, very loyal.
Very loyal fan base, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking necessarily about a broad fan base. We're talking about a loyal, rabid fan base that can be reasonably relied upon during the course of the year to come back and to enjoy it and to maybe be messaged with or be engaged with.
That's awesome. So, questions. I don't know if there's from across America if people have questions. Anyone in the room, if you have a question here, just run up over here so we can hear you. No pressure, but
do you guys use YouTube? Do you have YouTube? Do you have official YouTube channels that you curate and? Yeah. And how do you find? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know who that was. How do you find your audience? Do they react, or are you able to sort of build a fan base or a subscribership?
Simon, do you want to come up here?
Yeah, I'll come up and yeah.
Sorry.
Simon Carlos.
Oh yeah. Hey, how are you? Yeah.
Simon from GDC, particularly GDC has about I think 140,000 subscribers on this YouTube channel. So
that's great.
Yeah. And so one thing that we've learned is we post a video every day. 365 days a year, so that does require you to have a lot of content, but that seems to work. The regular upload from people that subscribe to channels is important. You can't just sort of slide in a couple of times a year.
This is key, The consistency of upload is the first rule of building that subscriber base,
Yeah, and then the other thing we found interestingly, because you talk about length of content, is for a while we did think that short form was important, so we would cut up, a lot of our conference talks are quite long, so we would try and cut them up into 7-minute kind of stretches, or we had a few micro talks where we could separate them out. But what we found in the end was that because they were originally presented at 30 or 60 minutes, actually just putting them out there at 30 or 60 minutes, because people have ways to watch YouTube. A lot of people watch talks on 1.5 speed, or even 2 speed, because that option is there on YouTube. So it means it's not necessarily a 30-minute talk; it might be a 15-minute talk if you're prepared to hear the person kind of talk quickly. So I think we ended up deciding actually that it was I think we ended up deciding it was actually a net positive not to edit that information, because people also, it's very easy to scrub around videos.
Right.
So rather than get rid of the context, we're now just providing the full talk context, and you can just scrub around to the bits you like.
Right.
And as you know, in the comments, people can leave timestamps of the things that they're most interested in.
Yep.
So it's not necessarily everyone needs to watch it start to finish.
Yeah.
So I think those are the experiences we've had so far, but it does require a lot of discipline and teams to actually do that on a regular basis. Actually, Bryant, who's over there right now, is the guy who posts everything daily. You know, we need to get stuff converted. We need to get like a little bumper on the front of it. We need to check it. You know, so there's actually quite a lot of extra work from getting the videos to posting. Also, comment moderation is
right. Of course.
Turn off comments on some videos.
Yeah.
So the overhead here, if you have an audience, is not insignificant.
Right.
But it can be positive.
So Simon, how are you measuring the impact of the video? So you have all these followers, that's fantastic. Like, are you able to identify if it's increasing your attendance base or your ROI in any way, shape, or form?
That is a good question. We ask people whether they watch it in the post-show survey, and more people watch it.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily why more people come. So I think we are still struggling a little bit. Well, other than we think it gets the message out. But Brian, do you want to say?
We have some new ants. Do I have to come out there?
Yeah, no one in the rest of the world will hear.
We can't hide it. Okay. I'll stand next to Simon. So
there's some cover.
He doesn't looks nice AT&T effect. The two things the marketing team's working on. Well, there's one thing we can do, and there's sort of one thing we're working on doing. The one thing we do right now is we sort of try to check when a video. We look at, like, it's sort of not enough to just say, oh, this video has 200,000 views, because that's kind of the upper ceiling of the YouTube channel. Yeah. Because we have a Legend of Zelda talk from last year, which, for those of you who don't play games, Zelda is Nintendo's one of Nintendo's biggest franchises. It came out with a new entry this year, and we had to talk about the game, but 200,000 isn't enough to say this is a successful ROI. We're sort of looking at it and going, okay, that's a lot of people who like Zelda. That's sunshines and people who like Zelda. So on the other hand, we do have talks. We have a lot of game animation talks that go up these days. We're able to say that's talking to game animators, who is obviously a way more niche group, and when that thing has a lot of views, that means there's people who both like the game and or care about the game art enough, and that those people are potentially potential GDC attendees. And then what we're working on, and what I'm sort of waiting for certain rocks to fall into place in order for me to do, is to use the to sort of go into the back end, try to use that rough assemblage of metrics to pick a list of videos the same way you're talking about, and just go in there and use the overlay features to just put links to, hey, if you care about game animation, here's a pass that will get you to the game animation talks next year.
Yeah.
I also had a question, by the way, unless anyone has anything.
Oh, sure, yeah.
No, I'm going to go sit down again.
Okay.
Leave me alone. My question was, Fox is a big company, and you're one of the companies who sort of, whenever platforms, like when the sun's going out your way on the platform, you're able to go to the platform and say, hey, can you help us out and make things work for us because we have a movie, whatever. That's kind of how the content moderation system came to life, which lets you guys monetize off of other people's content. But I think my question is, how do you deal when sort of the platforms change their algorithm in such a way that unfavorably favors your content? Because I think for all of our brands are going to be smaller than anything Fox has to offer, and we're all it takes is for one Google engineer to just be very, very mad at us one day, and our content could go down the pipe in terms of the auto recommendation stuff. How do you sort of view?
It's tough. I mean, it's tough. I serviced a company called Demand Media when I was at YouTube, and an algorithmic change essentially deprioritized almost everything they put up on YouTube, which were basically how-to videos, and it really hurt their business. I mean, this one sort of movement, this one decision made by this very large behemoth in the platform space, managed to create this situation which put them in a very disadvantageous position. I think from Fox's perspective, we are reasonably diversified in the sense that we have TV, we have film, we have artisan content, we have very broad appeal content. And so in that sense, I think that in the time that I've been at Fox, we have not experienced a situation where an algorithmic change has caused a deprioritization of our stuff. But we also have a lot of vendors that we work with that actually provide us constant counsel with respect to those changes. So people at Fox are very savvy with these platforms, but they're not necessarily plugged in to all the product changes or the little the very sort of obscure kind of, maybe they just went to the YouTube blog, for the announcement changes that affect tremendous amounts of the business. So we rely a lot on vendors to say, hey, by the way, you might want to consider that YouTube is about to implement X, and so for your programming plans going forward, you should be cognizant of that. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of companies called Fullscreen or Zephyr or companies like this, but they are very much kind of YouTube-centric service providers. They know when these things are happening. I think they might even get like a first nod or whatever, and they're able to tell us, listen, like be cognizant of this and make sure that you plan accordingly. I have not noticed with a large content company like Fox or the other studios that has happened in such a way as to cause a major like controversy, but it certainly happens with smaller companies that have maybe like a smattering of popular websites or like digital publishers. It's a problem. The larger companies like Fox absolutely have recourse when that happens, and they have access to the partnership team. And I don't know, actually brands also, so not too many brands have access to a partner manager at Google. They did do a program when I was there called the Brand Partnerships Program with Kate, actually. Kate was part of that program, Kate at Coke. And they were experimenting with this idea of, huge brands like Coke and Verizon are starting to leverage social media and really starting to rely on social media as a means of understanding who their fans and customers are. So we should be more accountable to them. And
these are huge brands.
They're huge brands.
That there's no access that a B2B company, which we're not a small company by
no.
any means, but there's no.
They're usually brands that are very, very invested in YouTube already. So for example, Coke, Kate and her team obviously use video a lot. They engage with people via video a lot. They probably have, I don't know, they might even have short series that they've created. So it's usually those enormous kind of, automotive. Verizon was the one I worked with, companies like that.
Questions here in the room. That was a great one. Yeah.
I'm just curious. My name's Jason.
Hey, Jason.
In Sales Intelligence for the Advanced Manufacturing Group. And I was curious if Fox is using a DMP like BluePie or I think Salesforce Mockbox, but something like that to help aggregate all
yes.
analytical data.
You have some insider.
and retarget your audience to other properties.
Yes.
I wonder if you explain all of those.
A DMP. No. Yeah. So a DMP is a data management platform, and you know better than I do, so I'll just be very layman about this, but it's essentially the mechanism by which you take in data in various pipes, aggregate it all into one place, and then piece it together.
Yeah, so that you can understand what's working and then I assume you guys use that to retarget.
Yes.
So I find out that people are looking at this ad a lot or looking at this video a lot, and then I say they must be interested in that, which means they like this universe, these characters, these actors.
Yes.
And if I have another Fox movie that's starring someone or has a similar theme, then you guys use that to retarget people to your other property.
That's exactly right. And so this is by no means complete, but it is a major project that was started, I think, just before I got there. Huge priority for the company. Fox is often called a traditional media company, but they've actually been very innovative for most of their life. I mean, certainly from a content perspective, Fox has been extraordinarily innovative. If you look at things like Empire and The Simpsons, and even the Fox Broadcasting Channel back when there were 3 was an innovation. So Fox is now that the two Murdoch sons, James and Lachlan, are kind of ascendant, and they're young men, they're in their early 40s, they're really refocusing Fox on understanding how to leverage data to properly target customers, to properly reach people and message them, to understand who is who, and yeah, YouTube is absolutely a part of that. So we are receiving the YouTube API it's one of the inputs into that DMP, along with all kinds of other information, ticket sales and things like that. And so the obvious objective, without breaking any safe harbor rules, is to try to figure out okay, we know that you like these YouTube videos. We also know that you bought this. We know that you watch Archer all the time on YouTube. We also know that you went. You bought a Planet of the Apes ticket from Fandango. So very clearly, we could probably maybe sell you a ticket while you're watching Archer, and that's easily done via one of these little calls to action, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is we're there yet, but I think that is the ultimate objective, is to sort of anonymously figure out if you bought this or if you like this, then surely it's likely you will like and buy this as well.
Drive people down the road for more revenue.
Exactly.
Can you imagine if we could do that?
We can't.
Yeah, he's gonna do it.
Are
Yeah.
you doing anything?
No, that's way down the road, but yeah, it's.
So what are you doing? I mean,
right now it's
what prompted you to ask that question?
My partner,
Give us a scoop.
works with a DMP.
Yeah.
Is that Fox?
No,
Okay.
at a competitor, which I won't mention.
No, fair enough.
But I was curious if Fox is heading down that same path, because it's I've seen what he works on, and I can see the value down the road. You know, they're probably in the same spot where everyone is, where they're trying to figure out, like, how do we use this information to drive business and further revenue for years to come based on the activities people are doing today.
Yeah.
And I think that it's something that most businesses could use to help generate revenue downstream, but obviously it's one of those things that's still kind of in its infancy generally.
It's in its infancy, and it's tough to get coordination. It's tough to get
It's a lot,
yeah.
a lot of data sources.
It's a ton of data sources.
You can tell what platforms people are using and how often they're watching and how long they're watching and what ads they're clicking and how much they're clicking, and you can use that to kind of drive. Right now, I know you guys probably use it to help redistribute ads that you're already placing. So like you've got 10 ads for a movie that come out and one's doing really well and you can see that people are watching it 90% of the way through, and so you say, okay, this one's obviously the ad we should be putting out there more, and you just shift everything around so that that's the ad people are seeing more often.
Yeah.
You know, I know we don't do that kind of online advertising, but it's in the same vein, and so I was just curious if it was something that
Absolutely,
yeah.
huge priority, and yeah, it's very clearly like an industry priority as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but yeah, and also in addition to what you were saying about ads, also figure out like who we shouldn't serve an ad to, right? Because they've already seen it, and so that gives us more value per ad as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Question from somewhere in Americas. Do you need to notify the uploader of fan content that you would like to use it or release it?
If I understand the question correctly, if a fan uploads a clip that is Fox owned, we already know, and we know that automatically. So every time, so Fox and all content companies deliver to YouTube a fingerprint of every show and film, right? So as a result, YouTube automatically is aware of that full-length piece of content, and therefore aware anytime it appears on the internet. So like, if someone in Russia uploads a clip of Planet of the Apes, I will automatically know because YouTube can see that that's occurred and sees it instantaneously. So no, we don't have to like communicate with that individual. We already know that that's occurring, and we can then get the information or the not data, not personal data, but like we can understand analytics behind how that person is consuming it and where they are.
Other questions? Here, there, anywhere? For Scott. Yeah.
Oh, from Sonoma.
Just to understand that a little bit more, so you guys, because you're a big company, you're able to get that information. Like for Simon, it's not like Simon could go in and say, hey, here's all of our content, YouTube, we want to know anytime anybody else uploads it. How could UBM use that?
Well, so when you upload content and claim it as your own, no one else can lay a claim to it. So that's how that. So it's called it's an automatic system called Content ID. So Content ID is essentially YouTube's means of protecting people's content against piracy. And so if you upload it, you claim it as your own, you have 100% rights to it, then no one else around, then you can make decisions about what you want to do with that, right? So you can set the duration of that, you can set rules with respect to the duration of that clip, like do you only want to leave up a minute? You can set rules as to where you want to geo-block it, if you do want to geo-block it. And so it's totally up to you, but what Content ID does is it prohibits anyone else from laying claim to that same piece of video.
Recognizes if someone else uploads a piece of that content?
It does, and so when someone else tries to upload a piece of your content and claim it as their own,
It's happened before.
which has happened before,
To a lot of our events.
you'll be notified in your YouTube kind of like interface, right? At which point you develop this sort of like queue of disputes that has to be resolved. And you know, if there's two claims to something, usually the person that has 100% rights will be able to say, actually this is mine, and that will be the end of it. If someone then comes back to counter that counterclaim, then it becomes this like legal issue, which it shouldn't go towards, because it should be very clear who owns what. Where you get these like conflicts is with music. Music is extraordinarily complex with respect to like publishing rights and performance rights and I don't know, all kinds of crazy rights that conflict, and that's when you have a lot of like multiple claims on a particular clip. And by the way, maybe it's also a video claim as well. So that's where things get very, very bizarre. But no, you should feel safe uploading to YouTube and trusting YouTube to protect your content as your own if you claim it. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to be like a large partner that uploads a ton of stuff or gets a billion views.
What else? Anything else?
Oh, yes.
Okay, can you speak to other social media platforms that help you drive your audience development, i.e. like Instagram?
So I focus specifically on like the major video platforms, and I get that Instagram is like a major video platform now. I watch Robin's Instagram stories a lot. They're great. But the issue with other platforms and us is that their ability to protect content, because piracy is still a huge problem. So their ability to protect against piracy and their ability to give us like real analytics and data behind video performance is what prevents us from investing a ton of time. I mean, we know that Facebook and Instagram are useful, and our marketing teams absolutely use Facebook and Instagram for the purposes of, seeding awareness about a movie or a TV show. But insofar as they're like sophisticated video platforms that we can use to track and identify and make informed decisions about, they're still kind of getting there. They're not there yet. Facebook, we've been talking to a lot recently, and I think in 2018, Facebook's level of sophistication will increase dramatically, and so we'll essentially be dealing with two major video platforms. But the great thing about Facebook, as I'm sure you know, is that the great thing about YouTube is that your video and your content lives forever, and it's searchable. YouTube being the second largest search engine after Google. But the great thing about Facebook is, of course, the social graph and the shareability. So like you put something up on Facebook from a conference or whatever, and people are inclined to share it. YouTube, sharing's difficult. It's not really a sharing place. It's not really a conversation place, although they're trying to do more with that. Facebook is much more of a conversation, sharing, immediacy, today, this happened, feed, now it's done. Whereas with YouTube, we kind of rely on YouTube sort of more as like a destination that you can go to and find this like 10-year-old thing that you still love and want to enjoy.
Is there like an account manager at YouTube or someone that you work with corporately that helps feed all that data, so UBM could maybe go and partner with someone at YouTube or at Instagram to...
So they definitely have like entertainment content partners that they use as their kind of like ambassadors to entertainment companies. I don't know the extent to which they have those same people to interface directly, like human to human, with like B2B companies or companies that aren't huge users of like short form content, like Coke and Nike and et cetera. I think certainly like I can certainly ask for you. I mean, these people are all like we like vacation together, but like.
Vacation with them.
Yeah. We went to Iceland, but I know it's so basic. It's so lame. But as far as I know, they have robust entertainment partnerships teams that can feed back this information. They don't necessarily do that with like brands and companies that aren't entertainment focused, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, from an advertising perspective, 100%.
Yeah.
They have like ads partners.
Okay.
But not from like entertainment video.
Okay.
We should work on that.
Yeah.
Think of all the content that we have. We could do that on vacation.
Right.
Saying.
You mean go-to channel. Must-see TV, yeah.
Anybody else in the room? Have any questions or that at home? You could just, come on up.
I was wondering if
Oh wait, no one did hear you.
I was wondering if with Facebook's like psychographics and capacity to understand what people are doing at various points in their lives, like I had a baby, I started a new job, is 21st Century Fox or even UBM taking those updates and using them to serve ads, like I started a new job, maybe for like advanced manufacturing, we should now serve you an ad for like an engineering conference that you might find interesting. Is that a thing you guys do, or is that a thing?
That's it.
Do?
That's a very good idea. I know, Allie, we do it.
So that is something we should certainly do. What I don't know is like to what extent that is done like on a very large scale, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's on a large scale. I think only a couple car companies are doing it. Like I know Lexus had a campaign last year that was like, you had a baby, like the RX, because it's their family car, would fit your new baby.
Right. I mean, we do like very, very like basic prehistoric version of that where like if there is a thematic day or a thematic like season, we'll of course like tailor content and messaging around that, of course, right? So like Mother's Day or whatever, Valentine's Day. But when we talk about like specific individuals and their milestones, it's something I think it would be so effective, especially if like, you know, one person knowing their friend's birthday could then share a clip of their favorite mutual movie. It'd be awesome. The extent to which like we from Fox can control or see that and then manipulate who does it and when, we're definitely not there yet. And if that capacity exists, I'm not entirely familiar with it, but it is an awesome idea.
Do you guys use location-based services on YouTube to like serve up specific ads? Like it's 105 degrees in LA today. Oh, we should serve up ads for more movies to get people into the theaters and out of the heat, kind of thing. Or is that a thing you do?
We serve ads. We serve ads on the basis of like the analytics we get from YouTube, which aren't terribly specific. Sure. They are geographical. They do give us geography, demographics, age range, things like that. And so combining that with other like analytics that we get from other agencies, we can target ads very specifically. Using just the YouTube data though, we can't get as granular as that.
Not specific.
Yeah.
And then I had another question.
Yeah.
For your YouTube analytics, and you were saying that like, we get 1 billion views a day and 85% of them are
1 billion views a month, sorry. 1 billion views a day would be amazing. Yeah.
Seventh of the planet.
Yeah. Every day.
Every single day. That one guy in North Asia.
They love the apes.
Right? They
Yeah.
love it.
Right.
But so you get 1 billion views a month, 85% of them are not your own. I mean, it's your own content but uploaded by different users,
Yes.
correct? Do you, or in the last couple of years, has your perspective shifted to building brand affinity versus purely using ads to generate content or revenue? Excuse me. Like, do you view your ads as content that make people fall in love with your brand and not just get you money by click-throughs?
So using content to make ads.
Well, yeah, using almost like in the way that outdoor industry does, like using ads as content.
Yes.
Like it kind of double dips.
What's funny you should say that. Oddly enough, you two with your pertinent questions. We created this video that merges two of our big brands that are from TV and film. So Archer and The Kingsman. The Kingsman was a film that just came out like last weekend. It's an espionage-oriented film, and then Archer is of course an espionage-oriented animated show. Both kind of like, in terms of genre, quite similar, cheeky, you know. And so we created this piece of content that merges these two worlds and merges these two brands, and we're now serving that piece of content in a shortened form as an ad for Kingsman. So we bought a campaign behind this video and now serve this video on YouTube as an ad for Kingsman, even though the original intent was to create a piece of original content that merges these two worlds and plays the various audiences off each other. So to answer your question, yes, we're doing exactly that. And it's something we're probably going to do more with because the test of that was pretty successful.
And do you find that, sorry, for a problem there?
No.
Do you find that making that kind of content that leads to brand affinity leads to more mentions across places on the internet? Or is it just kind of like, we made this content and we have like no concept of how to capture that data?
Yeah, so you're asking whether or not the use of those pieces of content lead to greater fan affinity. We find that in some cases they do, in some cases they don't. I mean, we always, of course, whenever we do something like that, we try to measure the extent to which, we measure, the kind of like the very broad things, right? Like viewership and engagement. But we also try to then look at the related brands, so like the independent Archer content and the independent Kingsman content to see, well, did it create any lift? And we have definitely noticed in the past that affinity for certain franchises absolutely lifts other franchises. They just have to like be demographically the same affinity, right? So like, for example, when Alien came out, we saw a huge lift in the viewership of Predator stuff on YouTube. And the same thing will be true of Deadpool. When Deadpool comes out, Deadpool 2 is coming out next year. When that comes out, we'll see certainly all kinds of superhero lift. Because there is this affinity overlap, and the algorithm absolutely will serve you those related videos on the basis of your watch behavior, because YouTube knows via tagging, etc., where the overlap is between these various brands.
So if we take that to like an event at UBM standpoint, think about a lot of our events have maybe not complete crossover, but they have lots of segmented crossover between, I can think of lots. Nina, I'm looking at you. Your brands in general have a ton of crossover from the AMG standpoint. I'm even thinking, there's cruise and cater stores where there's a food component to both, but only, by blasting out to both audiences, not everyone cares about it, but there is a small niche subset of each of those brands that do care about each other's events. That could be a really interesting.
We do this all the time, yeah.
We're always struggling. We know we need to build that up. We know we need to cross promote that, but maybe there's simpler or cooler or different ways of doing it.
Yep. I mean, yeah, there is audience overlap between brands that you think might be unaffiliated, and you should find out where those are and then leverage the audiences against each other. Now, I know these businesses are different, right? But we have to get people into a theater, and you have to get people into a conference hall. So it's not terribly different, and your event lasts for a finite period of time, and so does a film. And there's vast swaths of time between the events, and there's vast swaths of time between the theatrical releases. So these situations are analogous, and I think that's why, the way that we use social platforms to try to build those affinities and build those audiences, and to leverage different groups against each other to lift up the whole. I think these are things that both can do.
So with that, I don't know if there's any other questions. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, Scott, very, very much.
Thank you. My God, what a group.
I hope these kind of conversations, certainly we're always looking, the Customer Experience Council, Project 53, we're looking for feedback on, what is relevant. We're trying to connect different ways that people outside of our business think. And I know I mentioned this multiple times before, but we do things, we do some things really well, we do some things not so great. We can improve, but bringing in people who maybe face some of the same challenges as us, it's hard to directly relate events to movies, but there is an overlap and there is a fundamental crossover. And if there's, and again, probably not applicable to everybody who's watching, but sometimes hearing the way people solve problems and do things differently leads you to think of, in your own roles and in your own jobs, how you can do things differently or leverage things that you may not think is important to UBM because you're not seeing it happen right now, but it may be relevant in the future or something that you can create change. It can come, doesn't need to come from above, the top. It comes from everywhere within this organization. So we want to empower, I think the mission of the council, who's here in the room, because we have a on-site here in the Santa Monica office, is that we are evangelizing not just the great things that we're doing across different businesses to learn from each other, but also to take folks who are doing things differently and hopefully empower everyone within the business to push what we're doing in the trade show and expo and conference industry forward. So would love to hear your feedback, before, after, email, IM, text, whatever. But thank you again, Scott. Thank you, everybody. I think there were quite a few viewers. I got a couple of emails that said that it was full, that they couldn't get into the platform because it was at capacity, which is pretty awesome. So hopefully you enjoyed, take something away from this. We're going to post it if you weren't able to make it. Not that you can hear this because you're probably not watching. But if you know people who weren't able to get in or weren't able to make it today, we're going to do a little bit of editing on this and post it just like we did the last one, and looking for comments and feedback. So thank you, everyone. And oh wait, what was my, see you there, America?
Yes. Thank you.